What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Talkin Sports with Jake. Hope we're all doing well. Let's talk about some baseball real quick. So the second half of the season resumed last night. We had the first slate of games since the All-Star break. We had the Padres beat the Phillies 8-3. Orioles over the Marlins 5-2. Orioles continued to play well. We had the Giants over the Padres 6-4. Blue Jays over the Diamondbacks 7-2. Dodgers shut out the Mets 6-0. Mets looked really flat. Had just one hit. Brandon Miller with a leadoff double to lead off the game. It was like 3 inches short of a home run. They originally called it a home run, but the umpires they reviewed it and they saw it clearly hit off the orange line. They didn't clear it, so it was a double. Mets did not get another hit the rest of the game. And Verlander had 6 walks in 5 innings. And he continued to struggle with, well, for his standards, has not been good enough. Dodgers won 6-0. Brewers beat the Reds 1-0. Braves win again, surprise, surprise. They beat the White Sox 9-0. Red Sox beat the Cubs 8-3. Texas Rangers beat the Guardians 12-4. And Cardinals were leading the Nationals 1-0 with the rain. Then the rain suspended the game. They're going to resume today. It's 2:00 time I'm filming this, so in 15 minutes from the time I'm filming this, the game is going to resume. Rockies beat the Yankees 7-2. Yankees are actually now in last place in their division. Who would have thought that's how good that division is? Astros over the Angels 7-5. Angels now 2 games under 500. They continue to struggle. When it finally looked like they were going to make the playoffs, they're falling apart. Mike Trout's out 2 months. Ohtani might be on a trade block. I don't think he's re-signing after the season. And things are all falling apart once again for the Angels. Twins beat the Athletics 5-4. Tigers over the Mariners 5-4. These are the standings as we start the second half of the season. The Rays still in first place in the American League East, but they are just a game and a half ahead of Baltimore, who has won 6 in a row, playing great baseball now. 20 games over 500 to Baltimore. Who would have thought? I mean, last year played a lot better. Were a couple of games over 500. They were very competitive, but didn't make the playoffs. Also, you did a couple of small things. You brought in Adam Frazier to help your lineup. You did make the trade for Culver to help the rotation. A couple of small things, but no one thought they would be the first wild card in the American League and be right there in the division race. The Rays lost 7 of 8 going into the break. The Orioles won 5 in a row to end the break, and the Orioles are only a game and a half out of first place now. Blue Jays are in third place at 51-41, 6.5 games out, and the Red Sox and Yankees are both at 49-43, both 8.5 games out of the wild card. But Red Sox are playing very well. They have won 6 games in a row. Yankees are not playing great. They have been maybe the worst team offensively since probably June 1st, or like bottom 5 in almost every offensive category. They fired their hitting coach right at when they ended the first half of the season. Dylan Lawson was let go. They brought in Sean Casey as a new hitting coach. He's an ex-MLB player. He had a solid career as an MLB player, was a first baseman, played for Oakland Athletics for a while. He's a 302 career hitter. 367 career on base percentage. Since he retired in 2008, he's been an analyst for MLB Network. And they brought him in. Alex Rodriguez was talking about it, I think, right before the Home Run Derby, which I'll get to the All-Star stuff very shortly for baseball before it. And I don't love A-Rod. I don't think anybody likes A-Rod. He might be the most hated MLB player ever. Not even Yankees fans like A-Rod. Most Yankees fans that I talk to, I know a lot of them from New York. Most of my friends, to be honest, are Yankees fans. At least the ones my high school friends here in New York don't really like A-Rod. A couple of them like, yeah, he was a great player. The steroid stuff isn't a great look. But most Yankee fans don't even like Alex Rodriguez. But I like him, but he is a pretty good. I would say he does know the game pretty well. He was talking about Sean Casey. They go from Dylan Lawson he's a very young guy. First of all, I don't know how he got that job. He was never a player, right? Never a player or anything. I think he may have coached a little bit in college for a couple of years. and then got to be the hitting coach of the New York Yankees. I don't know where they even got this guy from. Look, when you don't have a guy like Aaron Judge, who's coming off an historic 62 homer season, was arguably the MVP frontrunner at the time he got hurt. I think on June 3rd, June 4th, with that toe injury. When you lose a guy like that, you're offensively, you're not going to be quite as good. There's nothing you can do about that. And yes, they've had some other guys out. Stanton missed a lot of time. Donaldson missed a lot of time earlier in the year. Harrison Bader's missed a lot of time. But Stanton's been back for a while. Josh Donaldson's been back for a while. Harrison Bader's been back for a good while. And you look at, Anthony Rizzo, who's had no injuries since May 28th. I saw a stat like a week before the All-Star break. Since May 28th, he was hitting like 212 with no home runs. He's been in a deep slump it's not even a slump anymore. He's just not having a good year. A slump, something, like Francisco Lindor for a while wasn't a slump. At one point, he was 8 for 46. You think, all right, it's one thing if a guy struggles for a couple of weeks. For 2 or 3 weeks, he's not playing great. He's not swinging the bat great. But we're going on 6-7 weeks now for Anthony Rizzo. He's not playing well. Josh Donaldson's been abysmal. He's hitting 152 this year. He's got 10 home runs and 99 at bats. If you take away those 10 home runs, he's like 5 for 89 or something. He's been atrocious to the point he shouldn't be in the league. He's old. He can't hit anymore. Besides an occasional home run, he's an awful hitter. He doesn't have good speed. He's not going to steal bases, so you can't pinch run or anything. He's not a great defender anymore, so you can't bring him in for defensive first base. He's never been a light guy. Seems to have gotten along better in the Yankees clubhouse. Aaron Boone and Brian Cashman love the guy for some reason. But he's never been well liked. And really in any clubhouse that he's been in. He's not a great locker room guy. To me, I don't know what he's doing on the Yankees roster anymore. At this point, you might as well DFA him, give one of your top prospects a try, and at this point, play Isaiah Kiner-Falefa every day at third base. He's not a true third baseman, but he's a great defender who plays all over the field. I don't know why he couldn't play third base every day and be fine defensively. He's ever since the beginning of the year when he was struggling, has swung the bat pretty well. He's been struggling. DJ LeMahieu, who has won a batting title twice, is a little bit older now, and last year didn't have his best. He hit 250, but still had a decent. He hit 250. The numbers across the board were pretty good last year. Has been terrible this year. He's hitting 230, having the worst year of his career by far. You just go down the list of guys that are underperforming. Even Jose Trevino, a guy who, yes, he's really there for his defense, but a guy who was able to contribute with the bat pretty well last year. Hit 250 last year. Gave him enough with the bat. He's only hitting 210, 220 this year. You've got guys up and down the lineup who should be contributing and aren't. Stanton's been terrible. He's still hitting some home runs, but he's hitting just 211 this year. 211. And Stanton's never been a huge home run guy. He's a 40-50 home run guy, and those guys never usually hit for a ton of average. They never usually hit above 250, if not 230. But 211, that's really bad. Unless you don't pay to hit 50 plus homers, you can live with the 211 average, but his home run numbers aren't even that gaudy this year. That gaudy. He's not doing anything else. He's not playing the field. He's just been DHing all year. He's not throwing in a crap ton of runs. He's hitting 211. He's been terrible. That's just a fact. He has not been good. Billy McKinney, a kid who came up in the Yankee system, and they traded him. He was a prospect. Didn't really work out. Was in Toronto. He was in Milwaukee. He was on the Mets. It was pretty good for the Mets as a fill-in guy. A guy who's a top prospect didn't think he would be only a fourth outfielder. Expected to be a lot more than that. They brought him back in. They brought him back for the minor league system for depth. They called him up because of all the injuries they had. And his first 12 or 15 games, he was hitting 320. And I looked right for the All-Star, his average down to like 230. Like he's completely fallen off. He hasn't been able to contribute, you know. At one point they were playing Jake Bowser the other day, and lead off hitting like 220. Like their lineup has just been terrible this year. And you know, kudos to the bullpen for holding it together despite all the injuries. You know, Lou Trevino had Tommy John, so he won't pitch at all this year. Scott Efros will pitch well for them after getting the trade deadline last year. Had Tommy John in October, so he won't pitch this year. Jacqueline Osang is only pitching 3 games this year. I don't know if we'll see him at all this year. And Tommy Canley, who's been brilliant, is not going to let him run in like 16 or 15 games this year. Didn't make a season debut until like the first week in June. So their bullpen's had a lot of it. Ian Hamilton was pitched for really well this year, missed a bunch of time. They still have like one of the best, not the best bullpen in the league. Even the rotations had some injuries. Carlos Rodon's only made 2 starts. Frankie Montas has not made a start yet. Don't know if he will at all this year. Mr. Cortez has been out for a little bit with an injury. He hasn't even pitched well this year. So like the Yankees season has been very disappointing this year. They're not even in a playoff spot right now. I think they're like a game or 2 behind Toronto. I think they're 2 games behind Toronto for the last playoff spot in the American League. So they got to get it together. Because even if they sneak in the postseason and lose in the wild card rank and say, oh, despite all the injuries and all the deficiencies, they still made the playoffs. This is the New York Yankees. The goal is championship or bust every year. So if the Yankees win, 88 games, are the 7th seed, and lose in the first round to whoever the heck, like it doesn't even matter who they play, and they lose, 2 out of 3 in the first round. That's going to be a massive failure. And if they miss the playoffs, they're New York City is in trouble. That's going to be it's going to be horrible. And to me, like this team isn't built very well. To me, first of all, the Yankees, great teams, all those great Yankees teams were always built on left-handed power because the Yankee Stadium has a really short right field fence, so left-handed were able to feast. By like Anthony Rizzo, who looked like at the end of his Cubs tenure was starting to decline a little bit, but still a very good player, but not quite the all-star he once was. And was, still going to give you maybe 20 or 25 home runs, but not quite what he once was. And all of a sudden last year he hit like 35 home runs because he had a lot of balls that he hit that maybe would not have gotten out in Wrigley Field, left the ballpark in Yankee Stadium. And the Yankees don't have a lot of left-handed bats, at least none that make an impact. Outside of Anthony Rizzo, what left-handed bats do they have? There's very, very maybe Harrison Bader might be a lefty. I don't have this that in front of me, but most of that lineup is right-handed heavy. So that doesn't make any sense. They got way too many guys that are home run or bust. Stanton, Donaldson has become that. They got way too many of those guys. They don't play small ball anymore. They just have to throw that out the window. And to me, they don't have enough depth to me. You see what happened, all right, so guys went down, and depth is really important, especially in baseball, because, in football, the regular season is 17 games, and the playoff is only about a month. In basketball, all right, basketball is hockey, of course, it's important. Basketball, you're playing 82 games, and then you have, a possibly 2-month postseason if you win the entire thing. NHL, you have 82-game season, and then you have a pretty long postseason. So definitely important in all play. And MLB, you have a 162-game season, and then like a month-long postseason. Guys are gonna get hurt. Very few guys play 162 games. There's usually only a few players. Everything there's usually only like 9 even 10 players across the entire league. Not per team, across the entire league, like 9 to 10 players that play all 162 games. Nowadays, you rarely see guys play even 150 games. The guy plays 150 games. We're calling him the Iron Man. So, guys are going to get hurt. It may only, certain guys might be, you would hope that, that your injuries are only, you're only out for 2 or 3 weeks opposed to 2 or 3 months or the entire season. But guys are going to get hurt throughout the season. It's going to happen. It's a really, really, really long season in MLB. You start in April. You start, like April 1st, between like March 28th and April 3rd. So the regular season doesn't end until either like the very end of September, if not the first week in October, and the World Series doesn't end until either like around Halloween, if not gets into November. So you're playing from the World Season is from late March, early April until late October. Early November. It's a very long season. You gotta have depth, and the Yankees don't have a ton of that. And to me, I don't know why Hal Steinbrenner has so much confidence in this regime with Aaron Boone as a manager and Brian Cashman as a general manager. Aaron Boone was handed a World Series team when he took over as manager in 2018. First of all, why did he even get the job? I get it. He was a pretty good player for the Yankees. Also, he's famous for the game-winning home run and sent them to the World Series against Boston in 2003, I believe it was. All the rest of them will say, dang, the Aaron flipping Boone. But he was an okay player who, and then he was an announcer. He was I think on ESPN. It was an MLB analyst. He did some broadcasting. Had no coaching training whatsoever, and all of a sudden, once they fired Joe Girardi, after a 91-win season in a season where they were 1 win from a World Series berth. I still don't know why they fired him. I know his most recent stint in Philadelphia went very poorly. They didn't make the playoffs. He was fired mid-season last year. They promote Rob Thompson. All of a sudden, the Phillies were in the World Series. But he's a guy who was there for like 10 or 11 years, won a World Series. There was in the playoffs almost every season. And, yes, the last couple of years have been tough. You had a couple of years where they didn't make the playoffs. You had a couple of early playoff exits after, your World Series win. But, that year he made the playoff. And in the year where, we weren't sure how good they were going to be. They were still we're kind of like in a retooling phase. We're really young. We're able to make the playoffs. And we're 1 win away from an American League championship. And the guy gets fired. How do you fire a guy when he was 1 win away from an American League championship? And then bring in a guy with that resume, you fire a World Series winning manager who was a win away from a American League championship with one of the youngest rosters in the league, and you bring in some rookie who, just happened to play for you at one point. He had 1 big home run for you, and people like his analysis on ESPN. He hasn't even been to the World Series. I give him a pass in 2017. The Astros did cheat in the LCS, but 2018, they lost in the division series to the Boston Red Sox. Red Sox were cheating a little bit. They did have like 108 wins that year. I didn't expect them to win. Okay. But 2019, you lost to the Astros in 6 games in the LCS. The pandemic year, they almost missed the playoffs that year. They lost in the division series to the Rays. 2021, they needed a big trade deadline in that like 17 or 18 game win just to sneak into the playoffs. I think they made the playoffs like the last day of the season, or the second to last day of the season, or something like that. Lost in the wild card game to the Boston Red Sox, who you should have beat. Lost in the wild card game last year. 3 months into the season, they were on pace to have the best team ever. We're a below-average team the last like 3 months of the season, and then they got swept by the Astros in the LCS, and where they were pitiful. It was pitiful enough, right? They had one of the worst offensive showings in MLB postseason history. They were down 3-0 between game 3 and 4. They were asking the Red Sox team that came back and beat them 3-0 in 2004 for advice. Like that's how desperate they were. And this year, I'm not sure if they're going to make the playoffs. He misuses the bullpen all the time. The team has underperformed year after year after year. I don't understand what they see in him. Look, I'm not a Yankee fan. I don't care. I'm a Mets fan. My Mets aren't even any better, and they're even worse. But I just don't get what they see in him. Like, why do he keep just running it back with this guy? And Cashman, look, yes, Cashman's had a lot of success. He's been in the playoffs pretty much almost every season. He's never been under 500. First of all, like he was the assistant GM at one point, and then he got promoted to general manager. He was given basically he got promoted to GM like in the middle of a dynasty. But to me, he really hasn't done all that much ever since those like late 90s, early 2000s seems that he was handed. He didn't have to do anything. The team was already put together for him. What has he done? They won one World Series since then. Guess that's more than a lot of our teams can say, but this is the Yankees. The goal for the Yankees is World Series or nothing, and they have not won a World Series since 2009. It's been 14 years. All those Yankee fans are like, oh, let me know when your team wins a World Series. Like, y'all haven't won one in 14 years. I was 7 years old. I'm graduating college in here. I was 7 years old. The last time, supposedly, the greatest franchise in American sports has won a World Series. I know they have the second or highest payroll in baseball, but to me, Steinbrenner doesn't spend as much as he usually does, and Cashman's moves haven't really worked out. The Joey Gallo trade, and to me, this all season, I don't know how your lineup was that pitiful in the biggest series of the year in the ALCS against Houston, and outside of re-signing Aaron Judge. But all right, kudos to him for getting it done. First of all, that was more Hal, if anything, him making that phone call. Like, hey man, let's get this done. And then, negotiating. At first he was like at 8 for 320. He was like, I don't know. San Diego's offering me a lot more, but if you give me the extra year, I'll take a little less money to come back. And he was like, done deal. And I was like, all right, let's sign the paper. Let's get this done. So catching up. So I'm not even giving Cashman that. Also, if you a guy got to hit 62 home runs like that, a homegrown guy, you should be fired on the spot. To me, they still need another outfield bat. To me, I wasn't sold on Volpe, so I wouldn't mind they brought on their shortstop. To me, they need a better third baseman because we also the Donaldson was declining. To me, I thought they could have used another starter. Right, he got the starter in Rodon. But to me, a couple moves that he made, I don't understand. So Frankie Montas was already hurt when you trade for him. Why did you give up 4 prospects for him, knowing he was hurt? Let him pitch through an injury, which didn't work, and now he's probably gonna. I don't think he's gonna pitch at all. He hasn't pitched at all this season, and we're 90 games in. And the best case scenario is probably he comes back in September and maybe can give you 4 or 5 innings, and for the last month, and hopefully he shuts up with a playoff that they have to get to first. And even that is considered a long shot. And then he gives Carlos Rodon, who's a great pitcher, but has a lot of injury concerns himself, $162 million over 6 years. And then he's made 2 starts in the Yankees' first 90 games. I don't understand his logic behind that. Some moves he's made recently have worked. The Anthony Rizzo trade has worked out overall. He's been a pretty good Yankee. Hasn't been so good this year. He got Jose Trevino's been a much better defense fielder than Gary Sanchez. So okay, there's that. But to me, all those short stuff he could have signed in for agency, Seager, Semien, Sandy Swanson, any of these all-star guys, he could have signed to boost their lineup. And he passed. I'm sorry, but the trade to trade Gio Urshela and Gary Sanchez for Josh Donaldson and Kneff-Leffel was not a good move. Kneff-Leffel's been okay, but Donaldson's been terrible. Urshela, when he's been healthy, he's been very good. Even Sanchez has been a little bit better. He was, since he left the Yankees. That was not a good trade. I'm sorry, it just wasn't. Kneff-Leffel has been pretty good, and Volpe, ever since he had the chicken parm dinner with his buddy Olsen Wells, he's been playing a lot better. He's been swinging about a lot better for the Yankees, but there's no reason they couldn't have signed a guy like Corey Seager, a star like that, stick him at shortstop, and move Anthony Volpe to second base or third base. Move to second base, you could trade Gleyber Torres, who's a very good player, but I don't think will ever reach the potential that we thought when he was the #1 prospect in baseball. They could have moved him to third base and you could have held on to Gio Show. You could have made him like a little chess piece that could have been really useful. Yes, you still could have made the trade for Jose Trevino and have Sanchez have these backup. And Trevino and Gary Sanchez as a catcher duo, I think, is better than Trevino and Kyle Hikishoka. You have one guy who's pretty good defensively, one guy who's a little better offensively. Say what you want about Gary Sanchez. He's got very good power and is a 20 home run a year guy. Just comes with a 220 average and really bad defense. So to me, this regime is not working in the Bronx. If the Yankees don't at least get back to the LCS, I think you get rid of them both. Like the last almost decade and a half of Yankees baseball has maybe been the worst Yankees baseball since like they first became a team way back in the early 1900s. Or maybe not that far back, but like when they were like really bad in like if they're ever really been like the 4-year or 5 years or something. But ever since like the inception of time when they first started with like 1903 or something, this is like the Yankees has never been this mediocre. That's every year they'll be in the playoff, but for the Yankees that means nothing. That's my spiel on the Yankees. American League Central, Minnesota's in first place. They're only 500. My division is awful. They're in first place, a half game ahead of Cleveland. Detroit's 5 big games out. Somehow the Detroit Tigers were 10 games under 500, only 5 games out of that division. White Sox 38-55 have been horrible this year. They have announced they do plan to set up the trade deadline. Dylan Cease is untouchable. Lloyd Jimenez is untouchable. Luis Robert is untouchable. And Andrew Vaughn is untouchable. Everyone else, make your calls. They are selling. And the Royals, 22nd, 65 are on would be on pace for the worst team ever if the Oakland Athletics didn't exist. And they might even have a worse record than the A's at this point. Actually, no, the A's are a half game worse. The Royals are really pathetic. Texas Rangers, 53-9, still in first place, but they've really come back down to earth after a really hot start this year. Offensively, they've been great, and Nathan Eovaldi's breaker year for the rotation. Rotation overall has been pretty good. When you put it in perspective, obviously Jacob deGrom was not factored this year. Yeah, he had Tommy John a while back, but still, the rotation still has been amazing. Their bullpen isn't that good. Houston is only 2 games out now. 51-41. Seattle right now at 500, 7 games out. Angels 2 games under 500. They've lost 6 in a row. They are 8 games out. They continue to struggle. Speculation they might trade out Tony at the trade deadline, which is in, I believe, 17 days, August 1st. And the A's 20-68 continue to suck. Apparently, Rob Manfred, the process to get him to Vegas has started, but nothing's given yet. Hopefully, they can at least announce at some point, somewhat soon, that they'll be leaving Oakland in at least for a couple of years, because they're dragging MLB's revenue down. National League East break continue to roll. 61-29, 9.5 million in that division. Marlins continue to play well though, 53-40. But the Phillies, 48-42. The Mets, 42-49, 7,500. They're still, aren't dead in the water. I think they're like 6.5 games out of the wild card. But it's been a very underwhelming season for the Mets. And National Thursday 54 are buried in last place. National League Central, Brewers and Reds are tied at 15-42 right now. Brewers beat the Reds last night. The Brewers and Reds had a 3-game series right before the break. Cincinnati took 2 of 3, and they open up. Ashley also with another 3-game series. Milwaukee took the opener of the series last night. But the Cubs at 42-48, 7 games out. Pirates at 41-50 or 8.5 games out. And the Cardinals are buried in last place at 38-52, 14 games under 500. Their president of baseball operations, John Molstick, said they will sell at the deadline. Their focus is more on 2024. So there will be just a bunch of guys on that team that will be traded very shortly. National League West, Dodgers have taken sole position in the first place. After not a slow start, but not the start we're normally accustomed to of the Dodgers. They've hit their stride. They've won 5 in a row. They're a game ahead of Arizona. Dodgers are at 52-38. Arizona's at 52-40. So the Arizona's they've played 2 more games than the Dodgers. They have the same amount of wins. Dodgers 2 less losses. San Francisco's hanging in there. 50-41, 2.5 games out. San Diego 44-47. Starting to play better. 1-7-10. It took 2 out there from the Mets to close the break. They just took the over from the Phillies to right after the All-Star break, 44 and 47. Now only 3 games under 500, so they're trying to hang in there. I think they're like 5.5 games out of a playoff spot. Corral buried in last place at 35 and 57. As for the All-Star stuff, the home run derby was won by Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Was a lot of fun to watch. I will say it's a little bit too easy now that it's timed. You have 3 minutes. Like you automatically get a 30-second bonus. You get the extra 30 if you hit 2 over 440. To me, I think they should go back to having it be 10 outs. And I say if you hit 2 over 440, you get an extra 30 seconds. If you hit at least 4 over 440, you get an extra minute. To me, it's a little bit too easy for these guys. That's why records are being broken every year. But it was fun to watch. I wish Pions did a little bit better, but I don't know who that pitcher was, but he was terrible. Regardless, Julio Rodriguez, 41 home runs in a round. That was fun to watch. And when I went to home run derby, I just wanted to be entertained, and that I was. So it was a lot of fun. Randy Rosarena was in second. He was a lot of fun to watch. He had a great rounds. Did a little pose. So Vlad did it to Rosarena when he beat him, and that was very, very funny. So that was a lot of fun. All-Star game. National League actually won. After losing 9 straight. I saw a stat, and they've only won before this year like 4 times since 1997. They beat the American League 3-2. YFD is a go at 2-run home run like the 7th or the 8th inning. So nationally, I believe he won All-Star Game MVP. So nationally wins the All-Star Game, and only other piece of MLB news I have is Clayton Kershaw, who's now for a couple of for left shoulder injury. That's his throwing shoulder. He will be out until about August. He wants to give it time to heal, he said. That's all I got for baseball. We'll talk some NHL free agency. Haven't really talked about yet because of everything on NBA free agency. MLB was heading into the All-Star break. So I'm going to go through what each team did. So let's start with the Anaheim Ducks. We're going to go in alphabetical order. They had a couple of good signings. They signed Alex Killorn for 4 years and $25 million. He's a solid player. He won 2 cups in Tampa. He's a solid top 6 forward, getting a little bit older. For him, that's a pretty big deal. I would probably give him a little bit of a lesser contract, but he's a good sign. And they added a good solid defenseman in Radko Gudas for 3 years and $12 million. Last offseason didn't really go as planned. They brought in Ryan Strome, Frank Vatrano, also John Klingberg. Klingberg ended up getting traded, and Strome and Vatrano they both regressed last year. Hopefully this free agency goes better. But overall, I think they built 2 pretty good signings. They're in a massive rebuild. Arizona Coyotes, who obviously have had a lot of trouble winning games recently. They made a couple of signings. They got Jason Zucker on a 1-year, $5.3 million. It's a pretty good sign. Also brought in Alex Kerfoot and Nick Bustad, so hopefully that helps out their scoring attack. They're absolutely terrible. They need to just blow up that team, to be honest. They're a dumpster fire. The Boston Bruins, they did lose a bunch of pieces. You made the trade Taylor Hall and Nick Foligno. You trade those 2 guys to block out. That was definitely a salary dump move. You end up losing. You don't re-sign Tyler Bertuzzi. You did re-sign. You only have $13 million in cap space. You re-signed Jeremy Swayman, the number 2 goalie who played well last year. He started Game 7 against Florida. Trent Frederick and Jakub Lauko, so they were restricted free agents. They were able to bring those guys back. And they made a couple of moves they made that I liked. They brought back Milan Lucic. They bring back an old friend for some toughness. They bring in Morgan Geekie, a depth defenseman. They bring in another solid defenseman, Kevin Shotcock, for a 1-year deal. He's much older, but not a bad third pairing guy. And they also brought in James Van Riemsdyk from a Flyer, who's still a pretty good goal scorer on a 1-year deal. So they were definitely shopping in the bargain bin, but that's the spot they put themselves in. Still don't know what's going on with Patrice Bergeron, if he's going to retire or not. Don't know what's going on with David Craig, if he's going to retire, go back overseas, or resign or not. But it's tough losing Tyler Bertuzzi. But thankfully, they didn't give up that. They didn't really give up anything for him at the trade deadline. And the whole Taylor Hall thing, that was definitely a salary dump. So they did probably the best they could with what they had. They need to move a contract, and re-signing Bertuzzi was going to be hard. We got the Buffalo Sabres. Sabres had a couple of solid defensemen, Alec Johnson and Connor Clifton. So Buffalo, they haven't made the playoffs in like 12 years, longest drought in the NHL right now. I feel like they're close to getting over that, back to the playoffs. So hopefully this will get them back in. We got the Calgary Flames. They've had a bit of a tough off season. They trade Howard Toffoli to the Devils to get back Igor Sharangovich, who's a good young player. But outside that, they've really done nothing. Also, they brought in a new regime, a new coach, and a new GM. They fired Daryl Starr and GM Brad Treveling. So the new regime, they have Elias Lindholm, Nicole Backward, and Noah Hanifin are all going to be free agents after this upcoming season. So could they end up getting traded? But they've didn't do anything. Carolina, they made a couple of good moves. You had a solid defenseman in Dmitry Orlov. Giving him $7.7 million a year is a little bit rich, but he is a good defenseman who can move the puck and can score. You had Michael Bunting, 3-year deal, $4.5 million a year on a 3-year deal. The Michael Bunting love him or hate him. Else they think he's dirty. He got suspended a few times. But he's got 23 goals in the last 2 seasons, so he's a beast. So he's a solid goal scorer to have on your bottom six. He's really tough. He's agitating to play against. Carolina definitely got bullied by Matthew Tkachuk in the Eastern Conference Finals, and now you have a guy that can match it. A guy like Matthew Tkachuk's toughest were like to face him again in the playoffs. So I think those two moves they made are two very nice moves for the Carolina Hurricanes, who the last few years have been one of the best teams in the league. Haven't quite been able to get to the Stanley Cup. They also re-signed their goalie for their Anderson, 2-year, $6.8 million. So they were very close to the Cup this year. They're getting closer. The team has got a great crop of defensemen. Never had enough goal scoring, but hopefully adding another good puck moving defenseman and a solid bottom six guy, Michael Bunting, who's also really tough. They're hoping that can get them over the hump. The Chicago Blackhawks, I really like what the Blackhawks did. They knew, okay, they're in a rebuild. They have sucked for quite a few years. They have a lot of young players. And they have a lot of cap space. What they did, they were kind of like a lifeboat for teams that, were trying to dump contracts of guys who were either bad contracts and weren't that good anymore, but they can get some extra draft picks out of it in a package, or guys that were still good, but they just can't afford to re-sign them. So they'll ship them off to get something back. And, so Chicago picked up quite a couple of quality veteran players without giving up much. Got back a couple of draft picks in the draft that just recently happened about a week ago, and in draft picks in future years. For example, they made the trade to get Taylor Hall with Boston. That was a nice move. And of course, the highlight of their offseason was drafting Connor Bedard, who looks like a future superstar, with the #1 overall pick. So I like the move for Chicago to make the move to go and get Taylor Hall from the Boston Bruins. You pick up Nick Foligno in that deal as well. I will say, I'll see what happened with the Blackhawks. The whole scam was terrible, but they've been able to put that in the past, and I'm very excited to see what Connor Bedard can do. Colorado Avalanche, they've been They haven't had didn't have a lot of cap space to work with. No, I like them to get Ryan Johansen. He's still a pretty good player. They're only paying half his salary. Supposed to paying him $8 million. They're paying him $4 million. Salary dump. Ross Colton. It is a guy who I assume they're going to bring back. Got to bring back top the bottom second. I expect that to happen. They re-signed Jack Johnson, who's not that good anymore, but he's not a bad depth. He's not a bad depth defense. He spend a lot of money on him. Andrew Cogliano made sense. They re-signed Bowen Byram's a good young player, and they also they made a couple more interesting moves. They brought in Jonathan Drew in the 1 year deal. Jonathan Drew was a former very high draft pick. I think it was a top 5 pick. Has become a bit of a journeyman, but has a couple of good seasons. He got a 1 year deal. A guy who in the past has had some good seasons, has the upside that he has. Bringing in a guy like that on 1 year deal was never a bad idea. They also signed Miles Wood. Miles Wood got a 6-year contract, which it's a risky deal, but he was the guy. He said after a tough time out there, he needed a fresh start. He had some good years in New Jersey. Risky deal, maybe boom or bust, but Colorado made some interesting moves. We'll see what happens there. Of course, 2 years ago they won the Cup final. They won the Cup, and this past year were upset in the first round by the Seattle Kraken. The Columbus Blue Jackets, I think, have done a good job. Defensively, they have been an absolute mess in recent years. After you trade goalie Junius Korpisalo to trade line to the Kings, and they made a couple of trades. They bring in Ivan Provorov and Damon Severson. I know Provorov the last couple of years was kind of regressing to Philly, but the Flyers have been a mess for quite a couple of years. I think he'll play a lot better in Columbus. Also make a trade for Damon Severson, who a couple of years ago looked like a future All-Star, has regressed recently, but I still think is a very good player who will help them. And you take Adam Fantilli with the 3rd overall pick. I thought he'd go second, and they got him at 3. That's a great pick. He's a really good center. I expect him to be in the Columbus Blues starting lineup on the first game of the season. You saw him do the Michigan in practice. Or if he got drafted with Columbus, so he's clearly very, very talented in Columbus, who had a really rough year last year. We're the worst team in the Eastern Conference. They fired Brad Larson, brought in Mike Babcock. Obviously Babcock is a guy who has obviously not been very well liked by players. Only time will tell to see if that works out, but he is a Stanley Cup winning head coach. But I do believe Columbus did get better in free agency. The Dallas Stars, they've been very busy. The reason if you got any Dana Woods I like, I think going from Joel Crevant to Luke Glendening, they go from Joel Crevant and Luke Glendening on your blue line to Sam Steele and Craig Smith when not looking line. You're meant to say the ball on 6 is definitely an upgrade. They do lose Max Domi, but I don't think the money he got, I don't think they should have paid him that. And after getting bought by Nashville, they brought in Matt Duchene on the 1 year. That's a really good signing. They're able to flip. They're able to move Kyle Neller's contract. So overall, I think Dallas did a good job. They've been in the conference finals, I think 2 of the last 3 years, and I think they're continuing to build a solid winner. The GM there, I forgot his name. He's won GM of the year. He's done a very good job there. The Detroit Red Wings, they're a team that's very young, and they've been after they made the playoffs like 20 years in a row. Recently haven't had a lot of success, but you signed JT Compher was really good, 5 years, $25.5 million, and I love the trade they made to get Alex DeBrincat, who had a bit of a slight down year in Ottawa last year after back-to-back 40-goal years in Chicago. But you give up a first-round pick next year, a fourth-round pick, Dominic Kubalik, who's an okay player, and another prospect. You give him a 4-year, $31.5 million extension. He's a really good player who will definitely help Detroit. Detroit definitely improved. their scoring attack. So I like what the Red Wings did in free agency with the Brinkhead move and signing JT Compher. Oilers didn't have a lot to work with, but I do like them signing Connor Brown. He's a young player. A couple years ago, I thought he'd be really special. Hasn't quite turned out that way. But I do think he's a pretty good player. And the Oilers may make a move on him. And then you got the next team up is my page that I'm looking at just refresh. So I gotta scroll back down. To get them out of the way, since I know what they did by heart. The New York Rangers, they chopped in the bargain, didn't have a lot of cap, but I do like what they did. They got Blake Wheeler on a 1 year deal worth only $800,000. I know he lost his captaincy last year, but Rick Tocchet is not very well coached by his players. I don't think that holds a lot of weight. He's a proven leader. He's still a solid player. Will help the bottom six. You bring in him. You bring in Jonathan Quick, who is nowhere near what he once was, but you only give him $800,000. I think he could be an okay backup goalie. I think he'll be a little better than Yaroslav Halak, who was your backup goalie last year, who was not good at all last year. And then they had another move that they made. And they signed Nick Bonino, who's another solid vet, top the bottom six on the 1 year deal worth $800,000. So they chopped in the bargain bin, but I think they made out pretty well. Florida Panthers, they traded away Anthony Duclair. They did a salary dump and they lose Michael Gudas, but I really like them signing Evan Rodriguez. He's a solid bottom six forward. He's very good. You make the trade to get you pick up Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Dmitry Kulikov, who to pad your depth defensively. They had early on lost some defensemen via injury, and it kind of hurt them as well. They were only an 8 seed going into the playoff before going to the Stanley Cup. They're a team that if they are better defensively, the sky's the limit for them because their scoring attack is fantastic. And certainly, but Bobrovsky is a very good goalie. First couple of years in Florida wasn't so good. Last couple of years has been a lot better, and he was phenomenal in this postseason. You have another guy there, Anton Lyon, who's got starting experience. You have a young guy in Spencer Knight, who's played a little bit, weighing in the wings. So Florida could be in for a big year next year. Could go back to the Stanley Cup. You never know. Los Angeles Kings didn't. I do like the move to get Pierre-Luc Dubois. He's a great player, still in his prime. You make a trade. You have a lot for him. Gabriel Velarde, who's still really young. Give up Follows, who's a good player. Give up some draft picks. But Luc Dubois is a great player. And you give him 8 years, $68 million extension. They also give Jose Kopitar a 2-year extension. He's still a great player. They brought it. Outside of that, all I did was bring Andres Englund, who's a depth defenseman. They brought in David Rich, who's a minor league goalie. He's probably going to start the year in the AHL. And if one of the goalies gets hurt, they'll call him up. But in recent years, the Kings have had a solid squad, but goaltending has really held them back. The last few years of Jonathan Quick were ugly. They tried to bring in Jonas Korpisalo last year. Didn't really work out as well as they thought, and they ended up losing in the first round for the second year in a row. And they don't re-sign Korpisalo despite him playing decently well. And then you bring in Cam Talbot, who's now 36 years old. He's had some good years. He had that 1 year where when he was young, when he was with the Rangers as their backup, and Henrik Lundqvist had that vascular injury that cost him a good chunk of the year, and he stepped in and played great. He's had a couple of good years, but for the most part, since leaving the Rangers, has not been that good. He's, he might be your starting goalie right now. I don't know. To me, yes, their top six looks really, really scary. They got some good young defensemen. Even after trading away Sean Durst, you think he goes to Arizona in a trade for a draft pick next year. but goaltending had held them back for several years. It's clear they're going to go as far as the goaltending takes them. For example, when Jonathan Quick was a Vezina Trophy candidate, they won 2 Stanley Cups, most recently in 2014. And the last few years when Jonathan Quick was not very good, they were they were lucky to even be in the playoffs. So if Cam Talbot or someone was able to step up in goal, I think it could be in for a special year. Especially after you add Luc Dubois to an already really good scoring attack. But if not, the Kings probably aren't going to be any better than a first round exit. On to the Minnesota Wild. They basically did nothing. They got Vane Lettieri, who's based from a Ranger. He's basically a AHL player, 2-year minor league deal, basically. They have 3 restricted free and they haven't signed yet. Philip Gustafson, Brendan Duhaime, and KMS, and none of them are that important anyway. Philip Gustafson, I would say, is much more important. He's one of their goalies. They're all going on arbitration. So he had a year last year, Philip Gustafson, but they haven't really done anything, so I can't really say they've been good or bad. Montreal Canadiens, they weren't very active. They're on a rebuild right now. And they brought in Elias Anderson for like a minor league deal. He's a complete bust, more top pick. But the Rangers have bounced around. They haven't really done anything. Nashville Predators were very, very busy. They were very busy. They added Ryan O'Reilly on a big contract. He's a former Cup winner, a leader. He's a really good top 6 forward. He'll probably be on the first line. He's got Luke Schenn's a very good defense, but anyway, Gusev Langley, who's a proven vet to help your bottom 6. And so Nashville, a team that in recent years has been very, very mediocre. Of course, they changed regimes. They fired head coach John Hines. And then Barry Trotz, their former longtime head coach, was one of the greatest head coaches in NHL history, is now their GM, their longtime GM. David Poirier was his name, stepped down. Barry Trotz got very busy. And also Andrew Burnett, who was a coach of the year finalist 2 years ago, was the interim coach of Florida, and then they decided not to keep him. I think Nashville will be a lot better next year. I think will be a top 5 team in the West. New Jersey Devils, as much as I hate the Devils, they did a phenomenal job. They locked up Jesper Bratt and Timo Meier on long-term extensions. The trade for Tyler Toffoli, who's a great player. He's a 35 goal, 85 to 95 point a year guy. I do like Sharon Ghost, who you traded, but Toffoli's a much better player than Sharon Ghost, and then you traded an extra draft pick. So an already really good scoring attack gets even better. They were able to trade Damon Severson, who they didn't really need. It's kind of like he was basically kind of unclog all those defensemen that they got. So far, I think what Devils have done a really good job. They got a really young team that I think will be good for a very long time. The New York Islanders. So I don't mind them trading Josh Bell to Chicago. Chicago, man, I don't even, I thought it was a good move for both sides. I know it's sad for some Islander fans to see a guy who's been there 15 years ago. It's always sad to see, no matter how good or bad they were, to see a guy who played that long for your team and was, a solid contributor overall. But he's not worth $5 million anymore. It was the right move. They flip him, move his contract to Chicago. They locked up their starting goalie, Sorokin. But to me, the other extensions didn't make a lot of sense. Giving Pierre Engvall a 7-year extension, I don't know. He's a solid bottom 6 forward. $3 million a year isn't, I think, is quite fair. But 7-year deal for a bottom 6 forward doesn't make a lot of sense. Giving Scott Mayfield a 7-year extension or whatever he got, I don't think he's that good. He's a third pair defender, doesn't make a lot of sense. And giving a 35-year-old goalie Simon Varlam before the extension to me didn't make a lot of sense. Didn't give him a lot of money. He only got $11 million total, so that's not even $3 million a year. So the money was fair for a backup goalie, but for a 35 or a 36-year-old to be the flirt didn't make a lot of sense. I don't know why GM Lou Lamoriello continues to run back the same team year in, year in, year out. They don't have enough goal scoring. Yes, their style of play is tough to play against in the playoffs because they're very physical. They're good defensively. They got great goaltending. But until they add goal scorers, they're not going to be. I know they made the trade for Bo Horvath and extended him, bringing in Pierre Engvall. You keep him long term, but to me, they still have enough goal scoring, and Lou every year we're like, oh, this is the year that Lou finally gets his big name goal scorer, and every year he strikes out. And speaking of the Rangers, the one thing that I messed up, they signed Eric Gustafsson, who I think will be a solid. I think we'll upgrade on the third pair, and they also extended Keandre Miller got 2-year extension worth I think $7.7 million. So opposed to giving him a long-term deal, they give him a bridge contract. With Senators, I do like the move to get Junior Corposal. I know they give him a big deal, 5-year deal worth $20 million, but Iowa was in desperate need of a goaltender, and they get a pretty good goalie in Corposalo. The Brinkhead trade, I don't love it. I think they could have gotten some more back. They get a first-round pick, a fourth-rounder, and then Kubalik on a prospect. But they're going to resign him most likely after this upcoming season, so he didn't need to be traded. Flyers, they were pretty busy. They have a somewhat new GM in Daniel Briere, who's of course still very young at this. And they brought in a couple of guys on 1-year deals. They bring in Ryan Poling, who he's a fourth-line player, but he's still only 24 years old. You bring Gardner Hathaway, who's a nice little player. I like him. Mark Stoll is ancient, but still an okay defenseman who's got he was a Florida. He's been around forever. He's a good veteran to have in that locker room. Flyers are a mess right now, but hopefully with a new GM, Briere brings some more change. I don't know what Torts is still doing there, but I don't think he'll be that much longer. It's not going well in Philly. Penguins, I really like what Kyle Dubas has done. The former Maple Leafs GM, they part ways. He became the president of hockey operations in Pittsburgh, who, of course, cleaned house in the front office. They gave Christian Jerry, who's an injury-prone goalie, a big contract, got 5 years, $26.8 million. But I really like them signing Ryan Graves, who's a really good defenseman. 6 years, $27 million. From our Devil. They had Lars Eller on a 2-year deal worth $4.9 million. He's a really solid bottom 6 forward. So far, so good in the Kyle Dubas era. Let's go to the San Jose Sharks. It's not been great, to be honest. I don't know who their goalie is. Their offensively aren't great. I do like them picking up Anthony Duclair for nothing. But Eric Carlson, who's basically their whole team, wants out. So there's that. So things are not going great in San Jose. David Quinn's a glorified college coach. Until he's gone, I don't think they're going to have any success. They're on a massive rebuild. Seattle Kraken lost a bunch of depth. Morgan Geeky, Daniel Sprong aren't there. Carson Soucy isn't gone, but I do like them bringing Kyle Yamamoto or topic who hasn't worked out. But you get on a cheap deal, you never know what could happen. They built a really good young team so far. They made the playoffs in only 2 years. Having Andre Burakovsky healthy next year, I think Seattle will take another step forward next year. The Blues didn't do a whole lot. Didn't really do anything major. They do make a trade for Kevin Hayes. I think he'll be a lot better in St. Louis. He was not happy with the Flyers. He also plays with Torah. I think he'll be a lot better in St. Louis. With Tampa, they do lose Ross Colton, which is tough. Also lose Alex Killorn. But I do believe Anaheim overpaid him. I talked about that a little bit earlier. I don't mind Anaheim bringing in some veterans, but I don't like him that we signed. I don't think he was worth that, but I do like them adding Connor Sheary to the bottom 6. Tampa's obviously been over the cap for so many years. I think their run is over, but they got 2 cups out of it. They were in the cup final 3 years in a row before this year. They can be cut a break. The Toronto Maple were very busy. They had some deals I like and some deals that I didn't like. They signed Tyler Cruz to a 1-year deal. I thought that was a really good move. I like them signing Max Domi. One move I didn't think a man was Ryan Reeves. I like Reeves. He's an enforcer. And him only getting the 1.3 million a year is fair. But a 3-year deal for a 37-year-old enforcer to me doesn't make a lot of sense. And they bring in John Klingberg, who fills a need, but 4.1 million I think is low at rich for Klingberg, who's coming off a down year. So we got the Vancouver Canucks. They stayed busy. They were very busy on the buyout market. They bought out Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Their biggest need were penalty killing. They need some help with the bottom 6 center, and then they need to be there defensively. And they bring in Carson Soucy, Ian Cole defensively, and then Teddy Bluger. I think address those needs. So Vancouver, obviously, they're in a tough spot. The whole Bruce Boudreau saga. A team that has underperformed the last couple of years. But overall, they did a good job. I think they're starting to get back on the right track. They just want Golden Knights do a whole lot. They trade Robbie Smith. That was definitely a salary dump. But the recent Aiden Hill, who took over a goal for the player after injuries. But and he played phenomenal. He re-signed 2 years, I think $7 million a year. And they also re-signed Ivan Barberson, who's a really good player. They have no cap space left, so there's nothing else they can really do. But most of our team, besides Robbie Smith, who's a very good player, but most of their team are just going to Stanley Cup in only their 6 or 7 years. The team is coming back. The team is really good. There's no reason they can't be one of the best teams in the league again next year. They are in good shape. But Eden Hill got 2 years, $10 million, not $14 million. The Capitals were pretty busy. They had a bunch of talks. They brought in Max Pacioretty for $2 million a year. You can get another $2 million, and some of them will probably get. If he's healthy, could be a really good deal. If not great, but $2 million is not that much money. I do like them signing Joel Edmondson. They only pay half his salary for $3.5 million, which is $3.5 million. Get him in a trade Montreal. I like that move. I heard they're looking at trading getting Kuznetsov to get out of a cap crunch to Nashville, but that rumor kind of disappeared. So they did okay. Capitals are, of course, in a bit of a transition phase. Their team's getting a little bit older. Of course, Alfred Ovechkin, who's still absolutely amazing and is still one of the best goal scorers in the league. Of course, is arguably the greatest goal scorer of all time. Is 38 years old now. They've brought in a new coach. So happens Winnipeg. They brought 2 solid players in Vlad and Domestic, who's a pretty good player, and they brought in Lauren Brossoit who's a pretty good back and goal. That's really all they did. But I do believe those 2 moves are positive. They're hoping I know they might trade Connor Heinrich, their goalie, and Mark Scheifele. This is an extension. But so far, overall, those 2 signings I thought were pretty good for Winnipeg Jets. And the Flyers have waived Tony DeAngelo. He's going to be bought out. He's not a bad offensive. He's a pretty good puck moving defenseman, but he's also awful defensively as a defenseman, and he's a complete locker room cancer. He was a guy who obviously had issues in the minor leagues. Close to Rangers, he had a big breakout year. Then next year, he was struggling, got benched, was put back in the lineup. Got into a fight with Alexander Jorgen, the Rangers backup goalie, after a shootout loss. Chris Kreider had to break up the fight. Rangers said we're done with him. They tried to trade him. No one wanted him. Tried to buy him out. He was like, I want my money, so you're not buying me out. They ended up buying him at, I think, 1 month after the season. He signed with the Flyers and did not go low at all. Torts did not like him, did not fit in with Torts, and he's gone. Moving on to basketball, although Joel Embiid said he did want James Harden to stay in Philly, the feeling is not mutual. Harden still wants to be traded. His star trade request in 3 years, guys. Oh, well to say about him. But I don't think he's going to be a Philly next year. I heard his preference is lost him with Clippers, so we'll see what happens. The Detroit Pistons extend Isaiah Stewart for $4 million. They got a lot of big guys over there. Just to see what they do with them. You extended Marvin Bagley a year ago. You got Wiseman there. Jalen Duren drafted last year, so we'll see what happens in Detroit. The Sixers max geography for Paul Reed, one of their bench pieces. 3 years, $23 million. The NBA is adopting 2 more new rules. Flopping can now be if a guy flops, that can be a technical foul, linked to technical free throws. Sort of crackdown on that. And now, if coaches challenge a play and they get it right, they get a second challenge. So it was always the rule was since they put the coach challenge in place that once you use your challenge, it's gone no matter what. Now, if you get it right, you get to use it again if you want later in the game. LeBron at the ESPYs, he got an award for like best record-breaking performance for breaking the all-time scoring record, and then he turned it into a whole speech to announce that he's not retiring. Well, was surprised, didn't really care for it. Well, whatever. But the Chicago Bulls, they've been granted a disabled player exception for Lonzo Ball to expect him in his second straight season. That's worth $10.2 million. We'll see what they do with that. And Team Canada has announced their FIBA team. And this is as follows. This is their training camp roster. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander from OKC, Jamal Murray from the Denver Nuggets, RJ Barrett from the Knicks, Dylan Brooks from the Memphis Grizzlies, Lou Dort from OKC, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I think he's in. I forgot where he is. Not be in New Orleans. Kelly Olynyk. Damn, where's Kelly Olynyk now? I forgot, but he's on the team. Dwight Powell from Dallas Mavericks, Zach Edey from Purdue. He was player of the year at Purdue last year. Had to stay at Purdue for another year. O'Shea Brissett from the Boston Celtics, Corey Joseph from the Golden State Warriors, and these last 4 I've never heard of. Kevin Pangos, Cassius Robertson, Phil Scrub, and Thomas Robinson. So they got having Shai and Murray in your backcourt is crazy. RJ Barrett, obviously us Knicks fans hate on him, but he is still a good young player. Did average 19 points a game last year. Brooks, 31 about him. He is a good defender. Lou Dort's a really good defender. Yeah, Alexander Walker and Winner are good bench pieces. Powell, I don't think is that good. Zach E, to me, is too stiff to work in the NBA. I like O'Shea Brissett. None of that 3D got to have in your bench. Corey Joseph. So the team's overall pretty good. I think the USA team's a little bit better. Either team, both teams, I don't know if either team wins a gold medal or whatever gold medal or championship, whatever you call it, for the FIBA tournament. For college basketball, Bob Huggins said that West Virginia put out a fake resignation letter and he wants to be reinstated. He never resigned, so we'll see where that goes. And a little bit of a sensitive topic coming up. Northwestern has fired Pat Fitzgerald. They fired Pat Fitzgerald a few days ago after 17th season amid a bunch of scandals. So there was reported hazing that was going on that was reported in the Northwestern football program. The team investigated, they said Pat Fitzgerald didn't know about it, although it did happen. Fitzgerald didn't know about it, so they suspended him for 2 weeks. Then there was a big outcry over, how can you only suspend him for 2 weeks? Then you had 2 players come out and said it wasn't just a little bit of hazing, like, like if a player made a mistake in practice, they would have to just run until the coach said stop. So that's very old school and it's very outdated and is not a tactic that should be used anymore. It's not that's not a good way to teach young athletes to make a mistake. That makes them scared to make a mistake, which is not how you should. Not something you should teach a young 19-year-old kid, and a 19-year-old student athlete. A couple of them said there was actually some sexual stuff that went on, some really, really disturbing stuff. And like 11 other football players are coming out and saying stuff about Pat Fitzgerald. That like a lot of stuff went on that he knew about, just didn't say anything. And the president of the school said that he may have erred in the original discipline, and he decided to fire him. Look, the fact that it took this long is a little concerning, but he is out of a job. His lawyer said that he might sue the school. He can do whatever he wants. To me, I don't believe he didn't know about this stuff. No, Northwestern football is dealing with this. And the last 2 years, they have just 2 conference wins and 4 wins overall. They've been horrible the last 2 years, so we'll see where they go next. So the NFL, Giants linebacker Jared Davis had names where he's out indefinitely. Still on time Saquon Barkley. They have 2 days to agree with a long-term deal. Negotiations have been going, so we'll see what happens. They really need him back. But he says he wants a long-term deal and he's going to sit out the first game of the season. The New York Jets extend All-Pro defensive tackle Quinnen Williams 4 years, $96 million, $66 million guarantees, the second most for a D tackle ever. I'm very happy they got that done. He's an absolute beast. Jets defense needs him. He huge piece of their team. I'm very happy that they finally got this contract done. Joe Mixon took a pay cut. I think it's over like $9 million in the next 2 years, so kudos to him. So he'll be staying at Cincinnati probably at least through next year as well. But they're still going to pay Joe Burrow. Not too much stuff that I have to go over. Golf. Right now the Scottish Open's going on. Rory McIlroy, I believe, is leading. He's up by a stroke. And by the way, the lift from PGA Tour can still poke each other's players. They ignored a recommendation to not do that. Is what it is. I'm gonna recap wrestling from this week. Raw from Monday. We had in the main event, he had Judgment Day defeat Seth Rollins and Owens and Sami Zayn. Of course, Finn Balor and Damian Priest had been beefing. And then, Finn Balor he went out to the ring and he was about to call it Damian Priest. Then Judgment Day's music hit, but it was just Dominic and Rhea. And Rhea said, all right, we can work this out, but let's do this backstage. And then they started going out. Then Finn stormed out of the ring, and then him and Priest going out. And Rhea said, "Can you get both stop being challenged and work this out?" And then Priest said, "Hey, look, I didn't cost you the match at Money in the Bank. I was never gonna cash in on you." And then they said, "We're cool," and they moved on. And after the match, they shook hands. So for now, their beef is squashed. We'll see what happens. Drew McIntyre met Road defeated Imperium, Giovanni Vinci, and Luba Kaiser in a tag team match. After the match, as they're walking up the ramp, we're screaming at Giovanni Vinci for losing the match. He stormed off, and then Luba Kaiser basically agreed with Gunther, shook his head at him, and then also stormed off and fouled Gunther. So there's some drama in Imperium's faction as well. By the way, the Judgment Day attacked Seth Rollins to lead to the match. Ricochet and Logan Paul came face to face. They were going at it, and then Ricochet jumped on the top rope and did a front flip right in front of Logan Paul. Logan Paul looked shocked. He was like, "That's really cool for a TikTok," and then Logan Paul went out, but then Ricochet was able to get the better of him in that. Zoe Stark defeated Becky Lynch in a one-on-one match. Provide a distraction there. Maxine Dupree was getting a graduation ceremony from the Alpha Academy, but then the Viking Raiders were interrupted, and Valhalla blindsided Maxine Dupree and stole her jacket. And Cody Rhodes he challenged Brock Lesnar to a match at SummerSlam. It's possible whoever wins the match could get a title shot in the future. The Miz defeated Tommaso Ciampa. He was some help from Bronson Reed. And Chelsea Green and Sonya Deville defeated Katana Chance and Kaden Carn in a women's tag team match. For SmackDown, Jey Uso super kicked Paul Heyman. Now something happened. Of course, Jey Uso challenged Roman Reigns for a championship. Bianca Belair was fighting Asuka for the women's championship, but then a lot of chaos ensued. Io Sky and Bayley were right there behind the barricade. Sky tried to get involved, and then Charlotte went to kick Sky in the face, and she missed, and she hit Bailey instead. And then Bianca started arguing, like, what the heck are you doing? And then she went to spear who moved out of the way, and she speared Bianca on accident, which caused a disqualification. And then Sky was about to cash the money in the bank on Asuka. But then Asuka, Sky was on the top rail about to hit one of her moves on Asuka, who was knocked out in the ring, and Bailey was standing at ringside, with trying to convince the referee to take the briefcase, but Asuka got up and put the green mist in the face of Bailey and escaped once again. So that whole thing continues. We had Bianca Belair, and the whole thing, if Bianca Belair beat Asuka, she would fight Charlotte Flair at SummerSlam, and Blair won by disqualification. So I guess that match is going to happen. We'll see. A pretty deadly with his Kit Wilson and Elton Prince, two very odd-looking fellas. They defeated Roland Brutes in a tag team match. Well, Sheamus and Raton. There was some shenanigans, and now on Bailey defeated Zelina Vega in a one-on-one match. And then you had Shotzi shaved her head. Of course, she's been in a feud with Damage Control. We had after they shaved part of her head in a backstage attack before, in a fatal four-way in the United States Championship Invitational. It was a fatal four-way. Santos Escobar, AJ Styles, Butch, and Grayson Waller. Santos Escobar won. AJ Styles was about to hit the Styles Clash, I think, on Butch. Then Karrion Kross, came on the screen and he was attacking his two friends, the OC. Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson was distracted AJ Styles. He started walking towards up the ramp. The Grayson Waller attacked him from behind. He went in the ring, but then he got Escobar knocked him down. They hit him with a splash, and that was the match. So could we see Santos Escobar against Austin Theory for the U.S. title down the line? And then Bobby Lashley appeared in he had a cameo. He came out of a limousine. He was greeted by the Street Profits. They dapped up, and then the Street Profits entered the limousine and drove away. So could that be a possible fact? And that could be something very interesting. And Alan Knight did a little promo. He said he wants to go after the United States Championship. And apparently there will be another U.S. Invitational Fatal 4-Way. It will be him, Sheamus, Rey Mysterio, and Cameron Grimes from NXT. I'm hoping Alan Knight wins that. Yeah! And only other thing I have that is I'm going to pronounce this one. I apologize, but Marketa Von Rosova. She won her first Wimbledon title. She's the first unseeded player to win Wimbledon ever. She defeated Anj Tabor, the sixth ranked player in the country, I believe, in straight set 6-4, 6-4. Tomorrow, Novak Djokovic tries to tie the all-time Grand Slam record. All right, that's all I got for you guys today. Until next time, which will be next Saturday, so long. Have a great day.